The moment Lauren realized the magnitude of her betrayal was when Jeff stood before her with a calm, piercing gaze, holding the evidence she desperately tried to hide. His voice didn't rise, but each word landed with the weight of a hammer. "I trusted you, Lauren. I gave you everything. And this is what you did to us?" The silence after his words was deafening, broken only by the sound of her own shallow breaths. As Jeff turned and walked away, the life Lauren had so carelessly gambled on crumbled, leaving her in the wreckage of her choices. But before we dive deeper into this gripping story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. The house was quiet, bathed in the golden hue of late afternoon sunlight streaming through sheer curtains. Outside, the gentle hum of suburban life carried on. Kids playing basketball in driveways, a neighbor mowing his lawn, the rhythmic clinking of wind chimes. Inside, Lauren sat at the dining room table, staring at a half-empty coffee mug and a grocery list she had started but never finished. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, pressing against her like an unwelcome presence. The ticking of the wall clock marked time in a life that felt as though it had stalled. The walls, painted a warm beige when she and Jeff first bought the house, now felt more like the boundaries of a cage. Jeff would be home soon, she reminded herself, likely tired from another grueling day at the office. The thought didn't spark joy or anticipation. It felt like just another routine checkpoint in a life that had lost its spark. Lauren sighed, running her fingers through her hair. The house was perfect, tidy, well-maintained, and utterly predictable. But as she looked around, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Lauren closed her eyes, leaning back in the chair. The life she had once dreamed of, marriage, a nice home, stability, was hers. So why did it feel so hollow? She had Jeff, her husband of 10 years, a man who was kind, dependable, and steady. But those very qualities, the ones she'd once admired, now felt like the steady beat of a drum she couldn't escape. She thought back to the early days of their marriage, the way Jeff would surprise her with flowers for no reason or whisk her away for a spontaneous weekend trip. Those moments had faded, replaced by work schedules, utility bills, and the quiet inevitability of routine. Jeff still tried, in his own way. A hand on her shoulder as he passed by, a brief smile over dinner. But it wasn't enough. Is it me, Lauren wondered, tracing circles on the table with her finger? She wasn't ungrateful. She loved Jeff. But love wasn't supposed to feel this stagnant. Her days were a blur of errands, chores, and waiting for him to come home. She longed for something more, a spark, a thrill, a reminder that she was alive. Lauren glanced at her phone, her reflection in the dark screen catching her off guard. She looked tired. Somewhere along the way, she'd lost the vibrant, daring woman she used to be. In her place stood someone safe, predictable, and utterly bored. Shaking off the thought, she pushed herself up and started clearing the table. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the room. Jeff would be home soon, and just like every other night, they'd fall into their familiar, quiet routine. But deep inside, Lauren felt the first tremors of restlessness, a whisper that perhaps there was more to life than this. Later that evening, Jeff walked into the kitchen, the faint scent of sawdust and cologne clinging to him from his day at work. He smiled as he saw Lauren setting plates on the table. "Smells good in here," he said, his voice warm but tinged with fatigue. Lauren offered a small smile in return, busying herself with the casserole. "It's just leftovers," she replied, brushing off the compliment. As they sat down to eat, Jeff made an effort to engage her. "I was thinking we could take a weekend trip soon," he suggested, his eyes searching hers. "Maybe head up to the lake like we used to?" Lauren hesitated, forcing a polite nod. "That sounds nice," she murmured, her tone non-committal. She didn't have the heart to tell him she didn't feel like going anywhere. Jeff reached across the table, his hand brushing hers. "I miss us," he said softly. Andrea tapped her fingers against the table. For a moment, Lauren felt the weight of his words, the sincerity in his eyes, but the restless ache in her chest remained, refusing to be soothed. She nodded again, withdrawing her hand to pick at her plate. Jeff let out a quiet sigh, retreating into silence as the conversation fizzled. As the days turned into weeks, Jeff's attempts to rekindle their connection became more frequent but less effective. He'd suggest movie nights, offer to cook dinner, even bring home little surprises. A bouquet of flowers, her favorite chocolates, but Lauren always responded with the same distant smile. In her mind, she told herself she wasn't being unkind. She wasn't shutting him out intentionally. Yet, every time he tried to pull her closer, she felt an invisible wall rising between them, built brick by brick, with her own growing dissatisfaction. One evening, as she folded laundry in their bedroom, she overheard Jeff on the phone with a friend. His voice was low, tinged with concern. "I don't know what's wrong," he admitted. "She's just different lately. Distant." The words struck her, but instead of guilt, she felt a flicker of defensiveness. Was it so wrong to want more, to crave something beyond their predictable, comfortable life? That night, as Jeff slept beside her, Lauren stared at the ceiling, her thoughts spiraling. The quiet rhythm of his breathing once brought her comfort, but now it felt like a metronome ticking away the minutes of a life she couldn't escape. The whispers of change grew louder in her mind, persistent and undeniable. Though she couldn't name it yet, something was coming, a shift, a choice, a path she hadn't dared to imagine. Jeff, meanwhile, remained unaware of the storm brewing beneath Lauren's calm exterior, his love blinding him to the cracks forming in their foundation. It started on an otherwise ordinary Monday morning. Lauren was in the office conference room, her laptop open in front of her, barely listening as her boss introduced a new project partner. She glanced up, and there he was. Jim. From the moment he walked in, Jim exuded confidence. His firm handshake and easy smile made an immediate impression. "Lauren, right?" he said, meeting her gaze directly. His voice was warm, with just a hint of charm that felt effortless. "Yes," she replied, her tone professional but polite. As the meeting progressed, Jim's charisma was undeniable. He spoke with a kind of energy that filled the room, weaving humor into even the driest of topics. Lauren found herself laughing at his jokes, her usual guarded demeanor slipping just a little. By the time the meeting ended, Jim had seamlessly integrated himself into their team dynamic. He lingered a moment longer as the others filed out. "Looking forward to working with you," he said with a grin. Lauren nodded, her stomach fluttering with an unfamiliar excitement. As she returned to her desk, she told herself it was just his personality, magnetic and engaging, nothing more. Over the next few weeks, Jim's presence became a constant in Lauren's workdays. They began collaborating closely on the project, exchanging ideas and strategies during long hours in the office. At first, their conversations were strictly professional, but as they worked late into the evenings, small personal anecdotes began to slip into their dialogue. "You're sharp, Lauren," Jim said one night as they reviewed a proposal. "Not everyone can think this quickly on their feet." She laughed, brushing off the compliment. "Comes with the territory." Still, his words lingered longer than they should have. Jim had a way of making everyone feel seen, but with Lauren, his attention felt sharper, more deliberate. He'd notice when she seemed stressed, offering lighthearted banter to lift her mood. "You're too serious," he teased one evening. "You should smile more. It suits you." Lauren smiled despite herself. She found herself looking forward to their sessions, the easy rhythm of their conversations, the way he seemed to genuinely value her input. For the first time in a long while, she felt interesting, special. As the days went on, Lauren began to notice things about Jim that she shouldn't. The way he leaned forward when he spoke, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows, as if ready to dive into anything. The way he laughed, a deep, genuine sound that seemed to pull her in. And her mind wandered during quiet moments. She caught herself replaying their conversations, analyzing the subtleties of his compliments. Was he just being friendly? Or was there something more in the way his gaze lingered a second too long? Late one night, alone in her living room, Lauren's thoughts betrayed her. She wasn't just drawn to Jim's charisma. She was drawn to the way he made her feel, alive, seen, appreciated. But with every spark of excitement came a wave of guilt. She knew the line she was tiptoeing. Jeff didn't deserve this. Yet, she couldn't deny the growing pull toward Jim. It's harmless, she reasoned with herself. It's just admiration. Nothing will come of it. And yet, deep down, she knew better. As she closed her eyes, Jim's smile lingered in her thoughts, a dangerous reminder of the emotional storm brewing just below the surface. It happened late one evening in the office. Lauren and Jim were the last ones there, the hum of the air conditioner the only sound as they pored over documents spread across the desk. Lauren stretched, rolling her shoulders after hours of focus. "You're incredible at this," Jim said suddenly, his voice softer than usual. She looked up, caught off guard by the intensity in his eyes. Before she could respond, Jim leaned closer. Time seemed to slow as his hand brushed hers, and then his lips met hers in a sudden, impulsive kiss. For a moment, Lauren froze, her mind reeling. The kiss was warm, intoxicating, a jolt of electricity that both thrilled and terrified her. Then, reality hit. She pulled back, her breath quick and uneven. "Jim, we can't. This isn't right," she stammered, her cheeks flushed. Jim ran a hand through his hair, his expression apologetic but unshaken. "I'm sorry, Lauren. I couldn't help it. You're incredible." Without another word, Lauren grabbed her bag and left the office, the kiss replaying in her mind with every hurried step. At home, Lauren paced the living room, her thoughts a chaotic whirlwind. The kiss had been a mistake, she told herself. A moment of weakness, nothing more. It didn't mean anything, she thought, though her racing heart told a different story. The guilt was already creeping in, clawing at her resolve. She thought of Jeff, of his quiet love and the stability they'd built together. The weight of her actions pressed on her chest like a stone. But nothing else happened, she reasoned. I stopped it, I left, it's over. Lauren decided she wouldn't tell Jeff. What good would it do to hurt him over something that didn't matter? She could handle this. She just needed to put it behind her, forget it ever happened, and move on. But as she lay in bed that night, the memory of Jim's touch lingered. It wasn't just the kiss that haunted her. It was the way it had made her feel, alive, desired. And that terrified her. With a shaky breath, Lauren closed her eyes, vowing never to let it happen again. Meanwhile, Jeff was none the wiser. He came home from work that evening, tired but cheerful, greeted by Lauren's distracted smile. As they ate dinner, he shared a story about his day, laughing at a colleague's antics. Lauren nodded, offering polite chuckles, but her mind was elsewhere. To Jeff, everything seemed normal. He reached for her hand across the table, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You okay?" he asked, his tone warm and concerned. Lauren nodded quickly. "Yeah, just tired," she said, offering a weak smile. Jeff believed her, never suspecting the storm brewing just beneath the surface. Over the next few weeks, Jeff began to notice subtle shifts in Lauren's behavior. At first, they were small, barely enough to raise an eyebrow. She seemed more guarded with her phone, quickly tucking it away when he entered the room. Her laughter, once easy and genuine, now felt restrained, as if she was holding something back. Even her routines had changed. Lauren, who used to relax in the evenings with a book or a glass of wine, now spent more time in her home office, claiming work deadlines as the reason. That was the February 2010 cut from the magazine, with a timely announcement followed by a picture of Lauren clasping a book in her palms as she signed a friend's name while trying. At dinner, she was quieter than usual, her responses curt and distracted. When Jeff suggested a weekend getaway to the mountains, she hesitated, muttering something about being too busy. It wasn't just the changes that troubled Jeff. It was the growing sense that Lauren was slipping away. Though she smiled and reassured him, it didn't reach her eyes. Jeff started piecing together these moments, his unease growing. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the nagging feeling in his gut refused to be ignored. Jeff, ever the steady and patient partner, chose not to confront Lauren immediately. Instead, he observed, quietly cataloging the changes in her behavior. When she laughed at something on her phone, Jeff noticed she didn't share it with him like she used to. When she left the room to take a call, her tone was softer, more guarded. She'd begun wearing a new perfume, a subtle but unmistakable floral scent he didn't recognize. On one occasion, when he asked about her late nights at work, her explanation seemed rehearsed, almost too perfect. "It's just this project," she'd said, forcing a smile. "Once it's done, things will settle down." Jeff started paying closer attention. He didn't want to believe his instincts. After all, Lauren was his wife, the woman he loved deeply. But doubt began to creep in, coloring every interaction. At night, as Lauren slept beside him, Jeff lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He tried to push the thoughts away, telling himself he was imagining things, yet the sense that something was amiss lingered, heavy and unshakable. Lauren could sense Jeff's quiet scrutiny, the way his questions had taken on a sharper edge, though he kept his tone calm. "You've been working late a lot," he said one evening as they cleaned up after dinner. "Is everything okay?" She forced a laugh, turning to place a plate in the dishwasher. "Of course. It's just this project, lots of moving pieces." Jeff nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You seem different lately, like you're miles away, even when you're here." Lauren's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm just tired, Jeff. It's nothing." She reached out, placing a hand on his arm, though the gesture felt forced even to her. But Jeff didn't let it drop. "Are you sure? You know you can talk to me." She stiffened, pulling her hand back. "I said it's nothing," she replied, her tone sharper than she intended. Seeing the hurt flash across his face, she softened. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to snap. I just have a lot on my mind." Jeff nodded again, letting the conversation fade, but the distance between them felt more pronounced than ever. Lauren knew she was deflecting, but facing the truth was a risk she wasn't ready to take. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. Jeff first noticed it during breakfast one morning. Lauren, typically chatty and warm, seemed distant, her responses brief and detached. She scrolled through her phone, her expression unreadable, while her coffee sat untouched. At first, he attributed it to stress. The project she'd been working on seemed demanding, and he'd heard her muttering frustrations late into the night. But as the days passed, Jeff realized it wasn't just exhaustion. There were other signs, small, but enough to tug at his attention. Lauren started dressing differently for work, her outfits sharper, more polished. She began staying later at the office, her explanations vague. "Deadlines," she'd say with a quick smile. There were moments, too, when her laugh seemed unfamiliar, almost guarded, as though it wasn't meant for him. Her phone became an extension of her hand, her grip tightening when he glanced her way. Jeff brushed off his unease at first, convincing himself he was imagining things. Yet, as these small changes accumulated, they painted a picture he couldn't ignore, a version of Lauren he no longer fully recognized. "Thanks." Jeff wasn't a man prone to suspicion, but he couldn't shake the growing feeling that something was off. Over the years, he'd learned to read Lauren like a book. The way she twirled her hair when she was deep in thought, or the slight crease in her brow when she was upset. But now, her behavior felt like a closed chapter, one he wasn't privy to. He began noticing her habits more closely. She had a new perfume, light and floral, one he'd never smelled before. When he asked about it, she brushed it off with a casual, "It was on sale." Her late nights at the office became more frequent, and when she came home, her excuses felt rehearsed. "It's just a busy season," she'd say, avoiding his gaze. One evening, as she laughed softly at a message on her phone, Jeff asked, "What's funny?" Lauren stiffened, quickly locking her screen. "Just something from the team," she replied, her tone too breezy. Jeff's doubts simmered, unspoken but undeniable. He didn't confront her. He wasn't sure he was ready to hear the answers. Instead, he watched, waiting for more pieces to fit into a puzzle he didn't want to assemble. Lauren felt Jeff's watchfulness, the quiet way his questions began to dig just a little deeper. She told herself he wasn't suspicious, he was just concerned. Yet, every time he asked, the tight knot of guilt in her chest grew heavier. One evening, as they sat on the couch, Jeff turned to her. "You've been distant," he said gently. "Is something going on?" Her stomach flipped, but she forced herself to remain calm. "No, of course not," she said with a laugh that sounded too forced, even to her. "Work's just been a lot lately. You know how it is." Jeff didn't push, but his eyes lingered on her a moment too long, as if searching for cracks in her story. The next day, he tried again. "We used to talk about everything, Lauren. I feel like I'm losing you." She stiffened, looking away. "Jeff, you're overthinking this. I'm fine. We're fine." Her voice was clipped, defensive. Though she softened after seeing the hurt in his eyes, the damage was done. Each deflection pushed him further away, deepening the emotional chasm between them. And while Jeff struggled to bridge the distance, Lauren retreated further, unwilling to confront the truths she feared most. What began as innocent camaraderie quickly took on a dangerous edge. Jim's compliments, once professional, became more personal. "You've got this fire about you, Lauren," he said during one late-night session. His tone was soft, almost reverent. "It's captivating." Lauren should have shut it down, but instead, she found herself holding on to his words, replaying them in quiet moments. Their conversations grew more intimate, their laughter more genuine, as if the office walls shielded them from the rest of the world. One evening, as they packed up after a long day, Jim lingered, his hand brushing hers as he handed her a file. The touch sent a shiver through her, an electric current she couldn't ignore. "I don't want this night to end," Jim said quietly, his voice low. Lauren froze, torn between the life she knew and the pull of something thrilling and forbidden. She smiled weakly, grabbing her bag. "Good night, Jim," she murmured, her heart pounding as she walked away. Lauren stood on the steps and placed her hands on the frame, a warm exposed feeling, thrilled by the light of. But even as she left, the boundary between them had shifted. Lauren knew it. So did Jim. It wasn't long before their professional interactions became laced with subtlety, an unspoken understanding that drew them closer. Lunch meetings turned into coffee runs that stretched longer than they should. Their conversations veered into deeply personal territory. Dreams, fears, frustrations. One rainy afternoon, Jim texted her, "Got time to talk? Not work. Meet me at the cafe down the block?" Lauren hesitated before replying. She shouldn't go, but the pull was too strong. At the cafe, they sat in a corner booth, the hum of chatter around them creating a bubble of intimacy. Jim's hand rested close to hers on the table, his fingers brushing hers just enough to send her pulse racing. The rendezvous became a pattern. Text messages exchanged late at night, excuses made for stolen moments. Each time, Lauren told herself it would be the last, but the thrill of Jim's attention drowned out her guilt. She began to lie effortlessly, crafting reasons for her absences, excuses that Jeff accepted without question. But the deception weighed on her, a heavy secret she carried into every corner of her life. As the weeks turned into months, the weight of Lauren's actions began to suffocate her. Though her time with Jim was intoxicating, the aftermath was agonizing. At work, she'd find herself distracted, unable to focus as she replayed their stolen moments in her mind. The thrill she felt in Jim's presence gave way to dread the moment she returned home. Jeff's small acts of kindness, bringing her coffee in the mornings, offering to take over chores, cut deeper than any confrontation could. His trust in her was unwavering, his love steady, and it only magnified the betrayal she couldn't bring herself to admit. Lauren tried to justify it. Jim understands me in a way Jeff doesn't, she thought, clinging to the idea that her feelings were valid. But deep down, she knew it was a lie, abandoning her family. One night, as she lay awake beside Jeff, guilt clawed at her. She stared at the ceiling, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. The lies she told herself weren't enough to drown out the truth. She was destroying the life they'd built, one secret at a time. Still, the thought of ending things with Jim terrified her. He was a spark in a life that had felt extinguished for so long. Letting go of him meant facing the emptiness she'd been avoiding for years. Lauren's heart was a battlefield, torn between the comfort of the life she knew and the dangerous allure of the one she craved. It started with a slip, one Lauren didn't even realize she'd made. Jeff had borrowed her phone to look up a recipe, a casual gesture he'd done countless times before. But this time, as he unlocked the screen, a notification popped up. "Can't stop thinking about you. Same time tomorrow?" The message was from a name he didn't recognize. Jeff's heart dropped. He read it again, his stomach churning. His mind raced for an explanation, but none of them fit. He glanced toward the kitchen, where Lauren was humming softly as she stirred a pot, completely unaware of his discovery. Over the next few days, Jeff's unease only grew. He began noticing receipts for late-night coffee runs and dinners she hadn't mentioned. One evening, as she showered, he peeked into her work bag and found a napkin with a handwritten note. "You light up my day, Jay." The evidence was mounting, and Jeff couldn't ignore it any longer. The Lauren he trusted, the one he thought he knew better than anyone, was hiding something. Jeff decided he couldn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, he needed to be certain, to gather enough proof so she couldn't deny what was happening. He began observing her more closely, making mental notes of her behavior. She often claimed to be working late, yet her stories felt vague and inconsistent. Once she mentioned meeting a colleague for coffee, but Jeff saw no mention of it on her calendar. One evening, when she said she was staying late at the office, Jeff drove by her workplace. The building was dark, the parking lot nearly empty. His heart ached as he realized she wasn't there. He checked their shared credit card statements, finding charges at places he didn't recognize. Restaurants and bars far from her office. He even sifted through the car's GPS history, uncovering trips to locations that had nothing to do with her usual routine. Through it all, Jeff kept silent, his outward demeanor calm. He didn't want to tip her off, not yet. But inside, the betrayal cut deeper with every new piece of evidence. Jeff's nights became restless, his thoughts looping in an endless cycle of doubt and heartbreak. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, torn between confronting Lauren and waiting for the right moment. Part of him wanted to demand answers, to force her to admit the truth. But another part hesitated, afraid of what her confession might mean. What if it wasn't what he feared? What if there was still a chance to salvage their marriage? Yet the evidence was undeniable. Jeff couldn't ignore the texts, the receipts, the changes in her behavior. He felt like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground beneath him crumbling. Still, he wasn't ready to leap. He needed more proof, more time to process, more courage to face the inevitable. He began to seek out answers. In the quiet moments, Jeff questioned his own actions. Had he been inattentive? Had he failed to meet Lauren's needs in ways he hadn't realized? The self-doubt only added to his torment. And so he waited, each passing day a torturous blend of love, anger, and heartbreak. Jeff knew the moment of confrontation was coming, but he also knew that once the truth came out, nothing would ever be the same again. It began innocently enough, or so Lauren told herself. When Jim suggested a weekend trip to Florida for a work seminar, she hesitated, but quickly convinced herself it was a harmless opportunity to network. At dinner the night before, Lauren casually mentioned it to Jeff. "There's this last-minute seminar in Florida," she said, her voice light. "My boss thinks it'll be good for the project." Jeff looked up from his plate, surprised. "Florida? That's a bit far for just a weekend." Lauren shrugged, feigning indifference. "It's mostly meetings and presentations. Honestly, I'll probably just be bored out of my mind." She forced a laugh, hoping it would ease his concerns. He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Well, if you think it's important, you should probably do more of it and less of the dumb bro monadas." "Of course," Lauren replied, carefully avoiding his eyes. As she packed her bag later that night, she ignored the gnawing guilt in her chest. She wasn't doing anything wrong, she reasoned. It was just a trip. But deep down, she knew better. Jeff had been suspicious from the moment she mentioned the trip. The timing, the vagueness of her explanations. It all felt off. He booked a room in the same hotel where Lauren was staying, careful to keep his plans hidden. This wasn't a decision he made lightly. He didn't want to spy on his wife, but the weight of his doubts left him no choice. As Lauren kissed him goodbye the next morning, Jeff watched her closely, searching for any sign of hesitation or remorse. She smiled, her demeanor calm, but to Jeff, it felt rehearsed. He waited an hour before leaving, driving to the airport with a sinking feeling in his chest. On the flight, he kept telling himself he might be wrong, that this might all be a misunderstanding. But as the plane descended into Florida, Jeff's resolve hardened. He needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Jeff arrived at the hotel late that afternoon, checking in under a pseudonym to avoid raising any suspicion. His room, conveniently located 2 floors below Lauren's, gave him a clear view of the lobby and main entrances. He didn't have to wait long. Just as the sun began to set, Jeff spotted Lauren stepping out of the elevator, dressed in a way that didn't scream work seminar. She laughed at something Jim said as they exited the lobby together, her arm brushing his in a way that felt too familiar. Jeff's heart clenched as he watched them leave in a car together. He followed at a distance, careful not to draw attention. They stopped at a waterfront restaurant, their table tucked away in a quiet corner. Through the window, Jeff saw Jim lean in closer, his hand resting briefly on Lauren's. It was all the confirmation Jeff needed, though it felt like a knife twisting in his chest. He couldn't hear their words, but their body language said enough. This wasn't just a work trip. It was an affair. "It feels like a clear line in the sky." Jeff returned to the hotel before Lauren, his mind racing. He had to confront her, but it couldn't be impulsive. He needed her to face the reality of what she'd done. He slipped into her room, using the spare key card she'd left on the kitchen counter back home. Her suitcase was neatly tucked in the corner, her toiletries lined up on the bathroom counter. It was the kind of meticulousness that once endeared him to her. Now, it felt like a mockery. Jeff laid out the evidence, printed screenshots of her text messages with Jim, photos from the restaurant, and a handwritten note. "I know." The simplicity of the words carried a weight he couldn't convey in person. Not yet. He placed the note and photos on her bed, arranging them so they couldn't be missed. Then he left quietly, his heart heavy with anger and heartbreak. As he walked to his car, Jeff felt a strange calm settle over him. The confrontation would come soon enough. For now, he needed to breathe, to steady himself for the storm that was about to break. The next morning, Lauren returned to her hotel room, humming softly to herself, still caught in the glow of the previous evening. As she stepped inside, the first thing she noticed was the bed. Her suitcase had been moved slightly, and on top of the pristine white duvet lay a collection of papers. Her heart sank. Slowly, she approached, her hands trembling as she picked up the first page. It was a photo of her and Jim at the restaurant the night before. The angle was unmistakable. Someone had been watching. Next to the photo was a stack of printed text messages. Familiar words stared back at her. "Can't wait to see you. You make me feel alive." Beneath them, scrawled in Jeff's handwriting, was a single sentence. I know. Lauren's breath hitched, her vision blurring as panic set in. She dropped the papers, clutching the bedpost for support. Her mind raced, replaying every lie, every secret. Jeff had been here. He knew. Grabbing her phone with shaking hands, Lauren dialed Jeff's number. It rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. Jeff, please, she pleaded, her voice cracking. We need to talk. I'm so sorry. Just call me back. She hung up and tried again, her desperation growing with each unanswered call. Each time, she was met with silence. Pacing the room, Lauren's thoughts spiraled. She couldn't lose him, not like this. Yes, she'd made a mistake, but their life together was worth saving, wasn't it? Jeff, she said into the phone again, her voice a mix of tears and frustration. I don't even know what to say, but please let me explain. There's nothing to explain, Jake said, already on the phone himself. The silence on the other end was deafening. She stared at the screen, willing it to light up with his name, but the phone remained still. Lauren sank onto the edge of the bed, burying her face in her hands. The weight of her actions was crushing, and Jeff's silence was louder than any confrontation could have been. Lauren returned home the next evening to an empty house. The quiet was suffocating, every corner a painful reminder of the life she and Jeff had built. His shoes were gone from the entryway, his favorite jacket no longer hung by the door. In the bedroom, the closet looked strangely barren. Jeff sighed. Once neatly arranged, was now empty, save for a few stray hangers. On the nightstand, a single envelope waited for her. With trembling hands, Lauren opened it. Inside were the divorce papers, along with a handwritten note. Lauren, you betrayed not just me, but everything we built together. I loved you, trusted you, and you threw it away. I don't want explanations or apologies. I just want peace. Jeff. The finality of his words hit her like a punch to the gut. She sank to the floor, clutching the papers as sobs racked her body. Jeff was gone. The man who had been her anchor, her constant, had left her to face the wreckage of her choices alone. And for the first time, Lauren realized the depth of what she'd lost. The house was eerily silent as Lauren stepped inside, her suitcase rolling behind her. She called out Jeff's name, her voice echoing in the emptiness. No response. As she moved through the familiar rooms, a chill crept up her spine. His shoes were no longer by the door, his jacket missing from the hook. The spaces where his presence once felt comforting now seemed stark and hollow. She wandered into the kitchen, where the coffee pot sat unused, and the calendar on the wall remained on last week's date. A lump formed in her throat as she noticed the faint outline of Jeff's keys, no longer resting on the counter. Her heart sank further as she climbed the stairs to their bedroom. The bed, neatly made, seemed untouched, and Jeff's side of the closet was hauntingly bare. The sight of empty hangers swung slightly, as if taunting her. That feeling of being watched was enhanced by her having the door open and already seeing Jeff was gone. Then, on the nightstand, she saw it. A white envelope with her name scrawled in Jeff's handwriting. Her breath caught as she picked it up, the weight of its contents already crushing her. Lauren sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling as she unfolded the letter inside the envelope. Jeff's handwriting, usually so precise, was slightly uneven, betraying the emotion behind his words. Lauren, I've spent days trying to understand how we ended up here. I loved you completely, more than words can express, and trusted you without question. But the person I thought I knew, the life I thought we shared, is gone. You've broken something that can't be fixed, no matter how much I wish it could. Her vision blurred with tears as she continued reading. I can't stay and pretend everything is okay. I deserve honesty, loyalty, and respect. The things you promised me when we built this life together. I don't hate you, but I can't look at you without feeling the weight of what you've done. I need to move on for both our sakes. The final words cut the deepest. "Don't contact me, don't try to explain, there's nothing left to say." Lauren clutched the letter to her chest, her tears soaking into the paper. The reality of Jeff's absence hit her like a tidal wave, leaving her gasping for air. She slid from the bed to the floor, her body trembling as sobs overtook her. Every room in the house seemed to echo her guilt, each memory of their life together now tinged with the bitter taste of regret. She'd destroyed the one constant in her life, the man who had loved her unconditionally. For the first time, Lauren faced the full weight of her actions. The affair wasn't just a mistake. It was the decision that had unraveled everything. And now, she was truly alone. A week after Jeff's departure, Lauren tried to find solace in the one person who still seemed to want her: Jim. She called him, desperate for reassurance, but his tone was clipped, almost dismissive. "Lauren, I can't talk right now," he said, his voice hurried. I need to see you," she pleaded. "Everything's falling apart, and I don't know what to do." There was a long pause on the other end before Jim sighed. "Look, I didn't sign up for this kind of drama. My wife is suspicious, and I can't risk losing my family." The words hit her like a slap. "Your family?" she repeated, her voice shaking. "You told me you were unhappy, that you wanted to leave her." Jim chuckled bitterly. "I never said I'd leave, Lauren. I was clear from the start. This was supposed to be fun, not whatever this is." Lauren's stomach churned as realization dawned. She wasn't special to him. She was a diversion, a temporary thrill. The man who had once made her feel alive now seemed like a stranger, and she was left to face the wreckage alone. The fallout came quickly and publicly. A week after Jim's cold dismissal, Lauren walked into her office to find her colleagues whispering, their glances sharp and filled with pity or scorn. She barely had time to settle at her desk before her boss called her into a meeting. "Lauren, we've received some troubling information," he said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were photos of her and Jim, intimate moments captured with chilling precision. Accompanying them was a typed letter detailing their affair, signed anonymously. Her face burned as she read the accusations, but it wasn't hard to guess who was behind it. Jane, Jim's wife, had been thorough in her vengeance, leaving no detail unexposed. Hours later, Jane confronted her directly in the lobby, her voice cutting through the quiet murmurs of onlookers. "You thought you could steal my husband and walk away unscathed," Jane spat, her tone dripping with venom. "You're pathetic." Lauren could only stand frozen, her cheeks flushed with humiliation. As Jane turned on her heel, the room buzzed with whispers, and Lauren felt the weight of every judgmental stare. The fallout was swift and brutal. By the end of the week, Lauren's boss placed her on an indefinite leave of absence, citing the scandal as a distraction to the team. Her reputation, once pristine, was now irreparably tarnished. Friends she'd once confided in stopped calling. Neighbors who used to wave now looked away when she passed. Even the grocery store felt hostile, with whispered conversations following her down every aisle. At home, the silence was deafening. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. She spent her days replaying every decision that had led her to this point, each memory laced with regret and shame. The phone calls stopped coming, and even the few who tried to offer support couldn't break through the wall of isolation she'd built around herself. Lauren had never felt so alone. One evening, sitting on the couch with a glass of wine she couldn't finish, Lauren stared at her reflection in the darkened window. The woman looking back at her was unrecognizable, broken, ashamed, and utterly lost. The world she had destroyed for the sake of fleeting passion had left her with nothing but emptiness. The days blurred into weeks, each one lonelier than the last. Lauren's phone, once alive with notifications from friends, now sat silent on the counter. She reached out to a few close colleagues, but their responses were curt, their voices laced with discomfort. Even the neighbors, who once waved from their yards or stopped to chat during her evening walks, avoided her now. She could feel their judgment in the way they turned away, pretending not to see her. At work, her absence had been noted but not mourned. The emails stopped coming, her projects reassigned without so much as a courtesy call. Lauren had become a ghost in her own life, the remnants of her existence lingering in the spaces she used to fill. The house, once a bustling home filled with laughter and shared moments with Jeff, now echoed with silence. Each room reminded her of what she had lost, and the weight of her solitude grew heavier with every passing day. Lauren couldn't escape the gnawing realization she was completely alone, and it was entirely her fault. Late one night, Lauren sat at the kitchen table, staring at the remnants of a dinner she hadn't finished. The stillness of the house pressed against her, forcing her to confront the thoughts she had been avoiding. She thought back to the choices that had brought her here, the moments she could have stopped, turned back, and chosen differently. What had she been searching for in Jim? Attention? Validation? Excitement? Her reflection in the window caught her eye, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to really look. The woman staring back at her was a shadow of who she used to be, her eyes hollow, her face etched with regret. "I did this," she whispered to herself, the words both a confession and a condemnation. She thought of Jeff, his quiet strength, his unwavering love, and how she had taken it for granted. She had traded something real and lasting for a fleeting thrill, and the cost had been everything. Lauren's breath hitched as tears welled in her eyes. For all her rationalizations, all her justifications, the truth was simple. She had betrayed not just Jeff, but herself. She patted her hand, comforting, reassuring, and picked up the phone. The breaking point came on a cold, rainy evening. Lauren sat on the floor of the living room, surrounded by unpacked boxes and scattered photos of a life that now felt like someone else's. Rain lashed against the windows, the sound amplifying the storm raging inside her. She held a photo of her and Jeff from years ago, their faces lit with laughter, their arms wrapped around each other. The happiness in their eyes felt like a cruel reminder of what she'd destroyed. The weight of her decisions pressed down on her, suffocating and unrelenting. For the first time, she felt the full depth of her loss. Not just Jeff, but the person she had been when she was with him. Lauren's chest tightened, and she gasped for air, tears streaming down her face. She clutched the photo to her chest, rocking back and forth as sobs racked her body. Lauren's response to the written message was self-deprecating. In that moment, she knew she had reached the bottom. There was no more pretending, no more excuses. She couldn't undo the past, but the question that loomed now was whether she could salvage anything from the ruins of her life. The rain continued to fall, washing against the windows as Lauren resolved to face whatever came next. Jeff hadn't been looking for anything new. In the weeks following his separation from Lauren, his focus had been on rebuilding his life, quiet evenings alone, therapy sessions, and leaning on the support of close friends. It was during one of these moments, at a casual dinner hosted by a mutual friend, that he met Nat. She was unassuming yet warm, her laughter filling the room in a way that drew Jeff's attention. They ended up seated next to each other, and what began as small talk quickly evolved into a deeper connection. Nay listened intently as Jeff shared pieces of his story, her empathy evident in her eyes. "You've been through a lot," she said gently, her voice steady, "but you seem like someone who knows how to move forward." Her words stuck with Jeff. Over the next few weeks they kept in touch, their conversations flowing naturally. Na's kindness wasn't overwhelming or intrusive. It was steady and patient, exactly what Jeff needed. For the first time in a long while, Jeff felt a spark of hope. Na wasn't a replacement for what he'd lost. She was something new, something that reminded him life could still hold unexpected joy. Amid the emotional turmoil, work had become Jeff's sanctuary. He threw himself into his projects, finding solace in the structured, goal-oriented environment. His efforts didn't go unnoticed. During a team meeting, his supervisor announced Jeff's promotion to project director, a role he had long deserved but hadn't actively pursued. The room filled with applause, but Jeff's response was modest, almost subdued. Later that day, as he stood in his new office, he allowed himself a moment to reflect. The promotion wasn't just a career milestone, it was a symbol of his resilience. Despite the chaos in his personal life, Jeff had proven to himself that he could rise above it. The new role brought challenges, but Jeff welcomed them. He found renewed confidence in his abilities and took pride in leading his team. His success wasn't just professional, it was personal. It reminded him that while he couldn't control everything, he could control how he responded and rebuilt. Each day in the office felt like a small victory, a step toward reclaiming his sense of self-worth. As the months passed, Jeff began to rediscover joy in life's smaller moments. One Saturday morning, Na invited him to a local farmer's market. They strolled between colorful stalls, sampling fresh fruit and laughing at the enthusiastic sales pitches from vendors. Jeff couldn't remember the last time he had felt so at ease. Na's presence was grounding, her energy infectious. As they sat on a bench sharing a warm loaf of freshly baked bread, Jeff realized he was smiling. Really smiling. Back at home, Jeff began to notice other signs of happiness returning. The simple act of cooking dinner felt satisfying again, especially when Na joined him, her hands covered in flour, as they experimented with a new recipe. He started running in the mornings, the crisp air invigorating rather than isolating. Even small tasks, like organizing his bookshelves, brought him a quiet sense of accomplishment. Life wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was his. Jeff had found a rhythm again, one built on gratitude for the present, rather than longing for the past. In Na's laughter, his work achievements, and the quiet peace of his mornings, Jeff discovered something he thought he'd lost forever: himself. One rainy afternoon, Lauren sat at her kitchen table, a blank sheet of paper in front of her and a pen trembling in her hand. Writing to Jeff felt daunting, but she knew it was something she had to do. Her fingers hovered over the paper before she began, the words spilling out in fits and starts. Jeff, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, and I wouldn't blame you for not reading this, but I need to say what I couldn't before. She poured her heart into the letter, each sentence heavy with regret. She apologized for betraying his trust, for taking his love for granted, and for destroying the life they had built together. You gave me everything, and I threw it away. There's no excuse for what I did, but I need you to know that I regret it every single day. If I could take it back, I would. I'm sorry, Jeff. Truly. She hesitated before finishing. If you're willing, I'd like to talk. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need to say this to you in person. After sealing the letter, Lauren felt a sliver of relief. For the first time, she'd allowed herself to be honest. A week later, Lauren's phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She hesitated before answering, her heart racing. Lauren, it's Jeff, the voice on the other end said, calm but distant. Jeff, she whispered, her throat tightening, thank you for calling. I got your letter, he said simply. If you feel it's important, we can meet, but I'm not making any promises. Lauren's breath caught, a mix of gratitude and trepidation flooding her. That's all I ask, she replied softly. Thank you. They arranged to meet at a quiet cafe downtown the following weekend. As the call ended, Lauren felt a flicker of hope, tempered by the reality of Jeff's tone. With the rest of the day tomorrow, she asked. Well, she thought, I can wait until afternoon. On the day of their meeting, Jeff arrived first, his posture calm but guarded. When Lauren walked in, he offered a polite nod but didn't stand. She sat across from him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I'm here because I think it's important for both of us to have closure, Jeff began, his voice steady. But understand, this isn't about going back. Lauren nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least she'd taken the first step. As Lauren left the cafe, she felt a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and a small, fragile sense of hope. While Jeff's words had been clear, his willingness to meet her gave her a glimmer of something she hadn't felt in a long time, the possibility of redemption. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she couldn't change the past. All she could do was move forward, one step at a time, and hope that one day she could rebuild her life, not with Jeff, but with the lessons she had learned. Sitting across from Jeff at the small cafe, Lauren felt the weight of her actions pressing on her chest. The air between them was heavy with unspoken words. She took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly around the edge of her coffee cup. "Jeff," she began, her voice trembling, "thank you for meeting me. I don't deserve this, but I needed to see you." Jeff's expression was calm, his eyes steady, but guarded. "Go on," he said simply. Lauren's words came in a rush, her voice breaking with emotion. "I'm sorry for everything, for the lies, the betrayal, for destroying what we had. I've spent months replaying it all, trying to understand why I did what I did. And the truth is, I can't justify it. I was selfish and reckless, and I hurt you in ways I can never undo." Tears slipped down her cheeks as she continued. "You were everything to me, Jeff. You loved me, supported me, and I took it all for granted. I wish I could take it back, but I can't. All I can do is tell you how deeply I regret what I've done." She paused, wiping her tears, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Not for my sake, but for yours. I don't want you to carry the weight of my mistakes. I have always trusted you." Jeff listened in silence, his hands resting on the table. Lauren's words were raw and sincere, and for a moment he let himself feel the depth of her remorse. But as much as her apology tugged at his emotions, it didn't change the truth of where they were now. When she finished, Jeff nodded slowly, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. "Lauren, I believe you're sorry," he said, his voice calm but firm. "And I've forgiven you, not because you asked, but because I needed to, for my own peace." Lauren's eyes searched his, hope flickering faintly, but Jeff shook his head gently. "That doesn't mean we can go back. What we had, it's gone. And as much as I loved you, I've had to let go of the idea of us." His words were steady, but his tone carried a quiet sadness. "You made your choices, and I've made mine. I'm moving forward, and I hope you can too." For Jeff, this moment wasn't about reopening old wounds. It was about closing the door on a chapter that had defined so much of his past, so he could fully embrace the future. As celebrations go, he played a short song that he wrote called Earth Song. The conversation lingered for a moment in silence, the weight of Jeff's words settling between them. Lauren nodded slowly, her tears subsiding as she accepted the finality of his response. "I understand," she said quietly. I needed you to hear it from me." Jeff offered a faint smile, one filled with a mixture of kindness and distance. "I'm glad you said it, Lauren. I hope you find a way to heal and rebuild your life." As they rose from the table, the gravity of their goodbye became clear. This wasn't just the end of a conversation, it was the end of their shared story. Lauren watched as Jeff walked away, his figure disappearing into the crowd outside the cafe. She remained for a moment, staring at the empty chair across from her. There was a bittersweet sense of closure in knowing she'd spoken her truth, even if it didn't change the outcome. Leaving the cafe, Lauren felt a strange mix of emotions, grief for what she'd lost, but also a sliver of hope. This was the end of one chapter, but perhaps it was the beginning of something new. A few weeks after the cafe meeting with Jeff, Lauren was startled to see Jane, Jim's wife, waiting for her outside a local bookstore. Lauren's stomach churned with dread, expecting another public confrontation, but Jane's expression was calm, perhaps even curious. "Can we talk?" Jane asked, her tone neutral. Reluctantly, Lauren nodded, following Jane to a nearby bench. "I'm not here to rehash what happened," Jane began, crossing her legs and fixing Lauren with a steady gaze. "What's done is done, but I've been thinking about you, about how you must feel right now." Lauren blinked, caught off guard. "You're not the only one who's been betrayed," Jane continued. "Jim didn't just hurt you. He's been hurting me for years. I've stayed because of the kids, the life we've built, but that doesn't mean I don't understand how this feels." Her voice softened, almost to a whisper. "You have a chance to start over, Lauren. Don't waste it. Take this pain and do something with it. Don't let it define you." For the first time in months, Lauren felt an unexpected warmth, an unlikely kindness from someone she'd wronged. Over coffee that afternoon, Jane shared pieces of her own story. She spoke of the years spent suspecting Jim's infidelity, the quiet heartbreak of pretending everything was fine for the sake of appearances. "I used to think it was my fault," Jane admitted, stirring her cup absent-mindedly, "that if I'd been prettier, smarter, more exciting, maybe Jim wouldn't have strayed." Lauren's chest tightened. "I've thought the same things about Jeff," she said softly, "but now, I think I was just trying to fill a hole inside myself, one that had nothing to do with him." Jane nodded. "Exactly. It's not about them. It's about us, figuring out why we let ourselves get so lost." Their conversation drifted into a shared exploration of pain and resilience. They laughed bitterly at the irony of finding common ground in such circumstances. As they parted ways, Jane touched Lauren's arm gently. "Rebuilding isn't easy," she said, her voice firm but encouraging, "but it's possible. You just have to decide you're worth the effort." Walking home, Lauren reflected on Jane's words. They lingered in her mind, their weight undeniable. For the first time, she began to see her pain not as an end, but as a beginning, a chance to rediscover herself and rebuild a life she could be proud of. Jane's strength, even in the face of her own betrayal, inspired Lauren. If Jane could endure and still find meaning, so could she. Lauren didn't have all the answers, but she knew this much. It was time to stop running from the past and start carving out a new future. Lauren hesitated outside the therapist's office, her hands gripping her bag tightly. Seeking help wasn't something she'd ever imagined doing, but after weeks of feeling stuck in her own guilt and despair, she knew she couldn't move forward alone. The therapist, a calm woman with kind eyes, invited Lauren to sit. "Why don't you start by telling me why you're here?" she asked gently. At first, Lauren struggled to speak, her voice catching on the weight of her emotions. But as the sessions continued, she found herself opening up about her insecurities, her fears, and the choices that had led her to this point. "I didn't realize how much of myself I'd lost," Lauren admitted during one session. "I kept looking for something to fill the void, but I didn't know how to face it." Her therapist nodded, acknowledging that is the first step. Healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about understanding it and learning to move forward. For the first time in years, Lauren felt like she was beginning to understand herself, not just the mistakes she'd made, but the patterns that had brought her to them. It was painful, but it was also freeing. When she and Alec carefully reviewed her diet and life, she realized her diet had been the originator of her problems. In an effort to step outside her own turmoil, Lauren began volunteering at a local shelter. The work was humbling and raw, but it gave her something she hadn't felt in months: purpose. Her first day was overwhelming. The shelter was bustling with activity, and the stories of the people she met were heartbreaking. But amid the chaos, Lauren found a strange sense of peace. Listening to others, offering them support, made her feel connected in a way she hadn't expected. One afternoon, she helped a young mother sort through donated clothes. The woman's gratitude was palpable. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "This means more than you know." As the weeks passed, Lauren found herself looking forward to her time at the shelter. It became a place of quiet redemption, a way to give back and step outside the confines of her own pain. She realized that while she couldn't undo the past, she could still create something meaningful in the present, and in helping others, she began to help herself. Lauren's growth was slow but steady. She celebrated small victories, reaching out to an old friend and being met with kindness, completing a month of therapy without skipping a session, and smiling genuinely for the first time in months. She even started painting again, something she hadn't done since college. The simple act of creating brought her joy, reminding her that she could still find beauty in the world. Each small step felt like a reminder that she was capable of change, of healing, and for the first time in a long while, Lauren felt hopeful about the future. One quiet evening, Jeff sat on his porch, the golden hues of the setting sun casting long shadows across the yard. He cradled a mug of tea, his thoughts drifting to the past. The memories of his life with Lauren came unbidden, not just the painful ones, but the moments of happiness they had once shared. He thought of their early days, the way they'd laughed over burned dinners in their first apartment, the late-night drives with no destination, and the quiet mornings when they'd read the newspaper together. Those moments had been real, filled with love and connection. Jeff didn't shy away from the harder memories, the betrayal, the heartbreak, but he found himself no longer consumed by them. Instead, he saw their relationship as a chapter in his life, one that had shaped him in ways he was only now beginning to understand. Lauren had been a part of his story, and while the ending had been painful, the love they'd shared had once been true. For that, he was grateful. After weeks of reflection, Jeff felt a quiet nudge to reach out to Lauren, not to reopen wounds, but to offer a sense of closure. He sat at his desk, pen in hand, and began writing. Lauren, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on everything that happened between us. For a long time, I was angry at you, at myself, at the way things ended. But now, I see things differently. Life isn't always as simple as we wish it to be. And people make mistakes, myself included. He paused, his pen hovering over the page before continuing. I want you to know that I forgive you, not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying that anger was a burden I needed to let go of. What we had wasn't perfect, but it was meaningful, and I'll always cherish the good memories. Jeff folded the letter carefully, sealing it in an envelope. As he dropped it in the mailbox the next morning, he felt a sense of peace, knowing he'd said what needed to be said. Later that evening, Jeff sat with Na on the couch, their hands intertwined as they watched a movie. Her laughter filled the room, a sound that had quickly become one of his favorite things. Jeff glanced at her, a quiet smile spreading across his face. Life with Na was different, simpler, more grounded. She didn't demand perfection from him, nor did she expect him to erase his past. Instead, she embraced who he was, flaws and all. Their relationship had grown deeper over time, and Jeff found himself imagining a future he hadn't dared to consider before. A future filled with love, understanding, and perhaps even a family of their own. As the credits rolled, Jeff leaned back, letting out a contented sigh. The wounds of his past had healed, leaving behind scars that no longer hurt, but served as reminders of the lessons he'd learned. His life wasn't perfect, but it was his. And as he sat there with Na, Jeff felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Lauren sat on a weathered bench at the edge of a quiet park, the sun dipping low on the horizon. The sky was painted in strokes of orange, pink, and gold, its beauty both calming and humbling. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of fall leaves and distant wood smoke. She wrapped her coat tighter around herself, letting the stillness of the moment seep into her. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel the need to rush or distract herself. The sunset, unhurried and inevitable, reminded her of the natural rhythm of life, how it moved forward even after the darkest days. The bench creaked softly as she shifted, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The chaos, the regret, the loneliness, they were still there, but they felt quieter now, less sharp. She didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it. The sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow across her face. In its light, Lauren found a quiet sense of comfort, as if the world was offering her a gentle reassurance. This is not the end. Lauren's thoughts drifted as she watched the fading colors of the sky. She thought about Jeff, about the life they'd shared, and the pain she had caused. She thought about Jane, whose words had forced her to confront the truth of her choices. For months, Lauren had wrestled with her guilt, her insecurities, and the overwhelming sense of failure. But sitting here, beneath the endless expanse of sky, she realized something profound. She couldn't change the past, but she could learn from it. "I made mistakes," she whispered to herself, the words carried away by the breeze. "But I'm not those mistakes. They don't define me." She reflected on the small victories she had achieved, her growth through therapy, her work at the shelter, the moments of laughter and connection she had begun to rediscover. Those steps, however small, were proof that she was capable of change. The future wasn't something she could predict or control, but it no longer terrified her. For the first time, she saw it as an opportunity, a blank canvas waiting to be filled with something new. As the last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon, Lauren felt a quiet sense of closure. She wasn't the same person she had been a year ago, and that was okay. Growth was messy, painful, and often slow, but it was also beautiful in its own way. She stood, brushing off the cool surface of the bench. The park was empty now, the air still, and the first stars began to glimmer in the deepening twilight. "Huh? Lauren looked up, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. She knew there would still be hard days, moments when the past would resurface, whispering doubts and regrets. But she also knew she had the strength to face them. "Tomorrow," she thought, taking a deep breath, "I'll keep moving forward." Her steps were steady as she walked toward the path home, each one a quiet promise to herself. To be better, to live with purpose, and to hold on to the lessons she'd learned. The night embraced her, cool and full of possibilities, as Lauren let hope guide her toward a new beginning.